What's up, guys? I'm gonna start this video out a little bit different by showing you my Pokemon collection once more and how it's grown. As you can see, now I have a Pokemon Center for healing my Pokemon. Inside there's actually a Nurse Joy and a Clefairy. Yes, there really is. Up here we've got our Kanto League gathered all up in a big row. And some of my favorites put to the side, Emboar and Throw. Emboar and Throw I beat all of White with. Level 60 Emboar and level 60 Throw. Went through the entire game with those two and just destroyed it. People are always kind of surprised to hear that, but really it was quite easy. If you can see on the sides, I've got a pink DS with a corresponding colored Pokeball and a blue DS with a corresponding colored Pokeball. And people always wonder, they're like, why you have two? Well, why go online to trade when I can just trade over my Pokemon with two DSs and they're super cheap in Japan? A used DS you can get for as low as like Nissan, which is about 20 bucks. See? Any more questions about those? If you do, feel free to write it in the comments. As for now, let's begin our real questions from Facebook. Okay, there we go. Let me position this a little better. Okay. Well, guys, there's something else I'm changing up a little bit. You may have noticed before in past videos that sometimes the camera gets a little shaky. Well, I've never had it on a stand before, so I finally bought a stand for my camera. I don't know if that's going to help because sometimes I still bump the desk that it's on, so maybe it'll still get shaky and blurry. If it does, I apologize, but hey, I went to the trouble of getting you a stand, so you can't complain anymore. Let's begin, guys. Jordan, and oh yes, by the way, I have gone to the very top. Jordan says, I know you are going to make an upcoming JFAQ on this topic, but are there any differences you've noticed between dating Japanese and Western women? I've kind of talked about this before in past JFAQs, but that's okay. This is very generalized, okay? So, women, please do not find me on the street and stab me. Because hell hath no fury, and yes, I do know that. Okay, Japanese women tend to be more quiet when you date them. And I'm not saying I hate that American women blab so much. I actually really enjoy a conversation with any girl, but I have found in general that Japanese women approach a date much more quieter. I think this is mostly to observe and also due to the fact that you've got to remember there's always a language barrier, almost always. So they're observing and listening very closely so that they can possibly, you know, if your Japanese is not so good, which mine, it's still not great, you know, so sometimes I have bad pronunciation if it's words that I don't say often. And if you're speaking to them in English, and English is obviously their second language, they have to listen very closely. So I think that's where dating really differs. Whereas, you know, obviously if you date a Western woman, you can just talk high speed if you want, and they can keep up the conversation even if you use slang or references to common media in Western culture. Chance says, what is your opinion about the controversy surrounding the U.S. naval base on Okinawa and the actions of the sailors/Marines stationed there? Okay, I actually have kind of some insight into this. I have two friends who are actually from the Okinawa base. They are retired military. They now work other jobs. One works actually for the Embassy of America here in Japan, and one works as an IT guy back in America. I'm not going to say their names, but they know who they are. If you're watching this video, thanks for watching, guys. They've kind of given me some insight into this because I've never been in the military. I don't think I'm any kind of expert since I've never actually worked in the military. But these two guys, one was Special Forces Marines and the other guy was IT guy in the Navy. So this is what they had to say. And pretty much both of their answers were pretty much totally the same. They said it tends to be the young guns that come in there, the 18 and 19-year-olds who fresh out of high school, just got in there, and they're just new to everything in life, and they really screw up, and they make it bad for everybody else. And honestly, they said they're pissed off at those kind of people too. It pisses them off too, because it makes their life way harder. As many of you may know, they have all different types of curfews and stuff that occur after these kind of problems happen. And anything like rapes and stuff like that, check the age sometime of the guys who did it. They said you always find it's really, really young guys in the military. As for people from Okinawa that are from the military, to be honest, I would say a huge percentage of them are super awesome guys. One thing I will say that I enjoy more about making friends from people who are ex-military here in Japan is I tend to find that what they've learned that other civilians haven't is a sense of loyalty to the gaijin friends that they make here, and that they're always there for you if you really need help. I've found some really transient gaijin friends in the teaching biz who are kind of wishy-washy when it comes to like make or break time, or, you know, when you're kind of in a bit of a trouble. At this point in my life, you know, I don't really run into many problems anymore as far as financially or like, you know, finding a place to live or anything like that, because I'm a married guy with a full-time job. But in the past, my military friends were there for me more than my normal civilian friends. So my personal respects for, you know, ex-military or people in the military is quite high. But I can understand where people living in Okinawa would be pissed off at the situation. Chris says, there is a rise of hikikomori throughout Japan. If you don't know what hikikomori is, it's kind of like a shut-in or a recluse. Mainly due to ijime, bullying, within the confines of the school system and their communities due to a conformity-type social structure and culture within Japan. This is correct, Chris. Chris, do you live in Japan? You sound like you do. My question to you is, do you notice a spark of individuality rising within Japan? And does it have to do with the rise of intercultural relationships between Japanese and non-Japanese families? Do you find conformity, such as tatame and hone, that means the inside and outside face, how you act inside of your house and how do you act outside of your house, uchi and soto, uchi, house, soto, outside, as a benefit or a setback? And do you think individuality would strengthen or tear apart Japanese cultural values? You know, I once read an article on Japan written by a guy who had lived here a really long time, and I thought it was one of the best statements I ever heard. And this goes back to military once more. He said, Japan is a lot like the American military. If you do what you're told, you stay in line, there's a lot of great benefits to help you out. If you decide to stray and go AWOL, life becomes very difficult. And I think that that is the best description of Japanese social structure that I've ever heard. Is that changing? I would say yes. I would say definitely that is starting to change. And my evidence of this comes from my own work with the youth of Japan within the school systems that I had in the past. And also the fact that the social structure of workplaces is starting to break apart. The loyalty that was once committed to these different workplaces is starting to fall apart due to the fact that they don't give work that lasts forever. Before, in the past, if you had a job in Japan, you started and you worked there almost your entire life. I mean, you would literally work there till you're like 65, you'd finally retire, and even then the company would still take care of you with a really good pension. Now they hire and fire at the drop of a hat. And due to that fact, the social structure within jobs here has really changed. And I would say that's starting to break into the social structures of society as well outside of the job and workplace. As far as individuality, I am starting to see a little bit more of it. For example, tattooing is becoming more common. It's not always associated with Yakuza. Younger Japanese people don't look at my tattoos and think, oh my gosh, you must be a gangster. They just know it's a normal Western tattoo. You would notice a big break in the generation gap from the bubble era to the freeders and neaters of today. So I think that's where you're starting to see individuality. Is it tearing apart the cultural values? That's a very tough question to answer. And I would say there is certain aspects of that. For example, customer service in Japan is slowly degrading. And I would say that's due to the fact that these jobs that the people get do not give them the loyalty of full lifetime work. So they have kind of the attitude of, if they're not going to take care of me for life, why should I take care of this company for life? And hence, why should I take care of the customer? So I think I'm starting to see a breakdown in customer service. If you feel you have a different opinion as far as this, that's fine. Post it in the comments. As far as other social values, I would say the schoolwork is also starting to fall apart in Japan. Education in Japan's really broken down, and I'd say this is due to the fact that people are not assured a really great job after they finish. Recently I read an article where people from Tokyo University, one of the best universities in all of Japan, don't try as hard and say they don't even care about getting into that university anymore because they can't even find a job when they get out. So why bust their ass their whole life just to find nothing on the other end? So I think that's a great question, Chris. Very educated question. I wish I got more like these. Let's move on. Okay, moving on to Cameron next. He says, what is the most uniquely Japanese thing that is not appreciated globally? And I would say that is probably how calm and centered a lot of Japanese people stay when there's a crisis or a natural disaster here in Japan. As you saw when the whole Fukushima disaster happened, people stayed quite calm, no riots. They lined up for food, water, shelter, no fighting amongst people. Now, mind you, now, the funds that were dedicated to that are not being used wisely, and that's mostly due to the faults of a lot of politicians and really greedy corporations. But the Japanese people themselves really handled that well, and I think that's something that's not seen around the world. Vitaly says, how do Japanese citizens think about Russia and Russians, as I know Russia and Japan are the only countries from World War II that did not sign a peace treaty? Okay, I would say now things are going pretty well with Japan and Russia due to the fact that recently there was an island dispute, and unlike China and Korea, who constantly fight with Japan over silly little islands that are like minuscule, Russia actually wanted to settle down and have kind of like a peace talk and see how they could use aspects of the island together and possibly share it, which is a great idea. I don't know why China and Korea can't figure that one out. And on top of it, another aspect, and this is kind of more of a negative one, that's kind of a positive one, I want to keep it balanced. This comes from blonde gaijin that I've met, blonde women gaijin I've met, who've told me many stories of this. I've had this been told to me by at least 4 or 5 different blonde girl gaijins who have never met each other. They've been asked by many a Japanese man or salaryman if they are a Russian prostitute and could they possibly buy them for a night. And I think this is due to the fact that there is kind of a lot of Russian prostitutes who do come over here. They make a bit of money on a tourist visa, head back, and start the whole process over again on another 3-month tourist visa. So, sorry, that's kind of a negative side. My source for that, blonde gaijin women, don't be mad at me, be mad at them. Daniel says, Pasmo or Suica, which do you prefer? Okay, so Suica is not spelled in Romaji, so are you trying to say Suica as in the Japanese watermelon? Because if it was Suica, it'd be S-U-I-K-A, but it's spelled S-U-I-C-A. Guys, in the future, if you're going to be using Japanese words, if you could possibly use like katakana or hiragana, or if you know the kanji, that would really be great. Because, for example, the word hachi, that means bee, that means 8, and that means bowl. And if you don't use the kanji for that one, I don't know which one you're talking about. Dominic says, I have a question which relates to your video about the rude gaijin on the train. You mentioned that it is rare exception that Japanese people will be rude to others like the 2 gaijin were to you. Have you ever been witness to or experienced a rude Japanese person on a train? Yeah, you know, there's kind of a group that's kind of notorious, and not just for being rude to like gaijin, but rude all over Japan to other Japanese people as well. And that is the Osaka Oba-chan. The Osaka Oba-chan is old ladies in Osaka. And twice already, no, actually no, 3 times I've had the experience where I've lined up for a very busy train that people line up because there is a fight for a seat when, not literally a fight, but like people rush to try and get a seat. And 3 times I've had a Osaka, only Osaka, Oba-chan, try to push their way past the entire line. Not into the line, but past even the first person going. And the first time it ever happened to me, it took me by surprise, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was just like, oh my god, are you serious? And like, of course the other people behind me pissed off too, and she didn't even care. She wouldn't look at anyone, she's just like, whatever. After that's happened, I've been quick to learn that the second the doors open, you lean against the train, and that person will smack into your back. They can't go past you unless they want to skip in front of every single person and push their way through the line, which would make it really obvious. So I haven't had that happen to me anymore, but I have had it attempted 3 more times by Osaka Oba-chan. Robert says, have you heard from the asshole guy and his girlfriend on the train? No, the video I made called How Not to Act in Japan recently, I dealt with some rude gaijin. I have not seen them again. Emiliano says, do you mainly listen to Japanese music or American music? I mostly listen to international music, and by that I mean all different types of music from around the world. I usually line up a top 50 list on YouTube that it generates from around the world, and it works out pretty well. I don't like to be set on just one country's music. Okay, hello, I'm a business administration student with a concentration in finance. I've been in Japan studying abroad for 1 semester in Hirosaki, Aomori. I'm returning to the States soon, where I'll be finishing up my last semester of college, and I want to continue my Japanese studies by myself. Anyway, my question is, I would like to get a job in my major in Japan. I was thinking of either applying for an English teaching job or trying to get a job in my field. What do you suggest is best? For this, I would say if your Japanese level is near native or almost native, instead of coming over here looking for a ALT job or a Youchien job or some kind of teaching job like that, if your Japanese is good enough, if you feel confident, try going to Hello Work, which is like a temp work and unemployment workplace that can set up gaijin with jobs that use gaijin who can speak Japanese. If you want to learn more about that, you can ask Sam. He got his most recent job through them. And you can also just come over here and, come to that and see if you can get work through their system. Ollie says, what are some Japanese death metal bands that you like? I don't like any specifically Japanese death metal bands. I like one doom metal band here called Mantle of God. They're pretty awesome. Kinji asks, this is Olden Youth, after living in Japan for years, can you now tell apart which Japanese people are from different areas? For example, one who speaks with Kansai Ben or one who speaks with Kanto Ben. If I hear them say the right words, yes. For example, okini. If someone thanks me with okini instead of arigato, I know you're definitely from the Kansai region. Ashia says, my question is, have you ever tried to wear any Harajuku fashion clothes? I think I'm a bit old for those, but no, I have not. They're cool, but I think I myself am a bit old for them. What does it feel like? I don't know. I've never worn them. Do you have any J-pop band that you like? If you have, can you tell us about it? As I've mentioned before, I like Momoiro Clover. I like Perfume. I like Dream 5. What other popular? Arashi's not that bad. And Nino's a cool guy. And I guess you can check out Exile if you're really into like Ochan boy band. And Bjorn asks, can you tell me about different ways to bow? Oh, this is a pretty good question. I know there are a few ways to bow, such as small nod with the head and a real proper deep bow. I can't seem to find much online. Okay, Bjorn, let me break this one down for you. It's pretty simple. It really depends on the situation as to how you're going to bow and how deeply you're going to bow. If, for example, you're thanking a fellow worker or a senpai or a kohai, or you're just thanking someone at work, you don't need to go totally crazy. You can just do the quick head bow, like, thanks. Or even if you just, like, have someone who delivers something to you at your door, just thank them like that. It's the same as saying, like, domo, a quick thank you. Alright? Now, if you've done something horribly wrong, like you've totally messed up your company's financials for an entire year, that's when you're going to be doing the deep bow, and that's a full 45-degree angle, bend at the hips extension. But, I mean, if it comes to that, I don't know what you've done to make it that you need to use such a bow of such a daishipai fail. A failing bow, a daishipai is like a major fail, an epic fail, and I don't know if you're really going to be in that situation to have to use it that much. If you want to say a deep thank you, you can go almost with the 45-degree bow, but you don't need to. Extreme 45-degree bow is really a sincere, I am really sorry, a gomenasai, okay? If somebody's done something for you, for example, your mother-in-law or someone has watched your kids on short notice, you can do kind of a deeper bow. You don't just do the head nod. You can do a deeper bow to say thank you. Or, if customer service has really gone out of the way when you've had a huge problem, you can do a deeper bow. But really, the deeper your bow has to do with the extremeness of the situation. Is it a super big thank you? Is it a super big sorry? Well, then it's a super deep bow. Matthew says, if I were to pass a Japanese person on the street and wave to them, would that be all right? or would that seem weird? If it's weird, what would be a proper way to greet someone while passing them on the street? Okay, so if you're just like meeting your friend on the street, you see your friend and you wave hi, that's not a big deal. I mean, that's totally accepted in Japan. Friends wave hi to each other. Now, one thing is a little bit strange is sometimes you may hear this. If you don't notice the friend and they see you, perhaps you're looking at your cell phone or something like that, it's common. They do this thing, they say this thing in Japan like, oh, like that, like, it always really surprises me. It makes me think that I've caused someone pain or something like that. So, oh. And that's kind of like, oh, I've run into you. And it always takes me by surprise. I've been here 7 years, and I still have friends who run into me on the street, and they'll be like, oh! And I'll be like, oh man, what, did I step on someone's foot? Did I run someone over with a bicycle? No, they've just been noticing me when I wasn't looking, and they wanted to let me know that they were there and stop and say hi. Totally okay thing to do. Wave, or you can do the oh! Okay. Joshua says, I will be going to Osaka and some other parts of Japan for 2 weeks this month and was wondering if there's any great temples to visit in Nara. Yeah, Todaiji, the largest wooden structure in all the world. It's got the third biggest Buddha in all the world, too. Todaiji, down in Onada. Down in Nara. And it's got the deer there and everything. You can feed them the crackers. My advice to you is put a cracker in somebody's back pocket and see how the deer react. You're going to get some good ass-biting photos. Brandon says, how much of Japan do you think you've covered traveling-wise? Gosh, quite a bit. Guys, I have been all the way down to Okinawa, made 5 videos on Okinawa, all the way up to Hokkaido, through Sapporo and stuff like that. I've made tons of videos on that. Over, 200 plus videos, you'd start to cover quite a bit of Japan. I would say I'm pretty well traveled. Probably my biggest place that I have not traveled to yet is I have not been to Hiroshima yet, so that kind of sucks, right? James says, not really a JFAQ, but what is the intro music you use for these vids? The intro music comes from a band, if I can say it right, called Control Brain from Newgrounds. You guys can go check them out. They've got some great music. And Tokyo Zeppelin actually made this intro for me. If you guys have not checked out Tokyo Zeppelin's channel, please check him out. He is an amazing illustrator and graphic design artist who visits Japan quite often and is quite knowledgeable in Japan. How much are apartment prices compared to the UK? About $700 to $800 to rent a flat, $450 to $700 to rent a bedroom here. Could you live for months in a capsule hotel? Well, again, I answer this question all the time. Where in Japan are you talking about? Because prices really change. Like if you're going to be in Inaka area, like a ryokan, a Japanese style hotel, then it's going to be kind of cheap, but maybe kind of expensive if you're going to a really ritzy one. If you're in Tokyo, it's going to be more expensive because the entire place is more expensive in Tokyo. So I can't really, I can't really give you a good answer to that. Could you stay for a week in a capsule hotel? Yeah, you could do that if you're just visiting here. I don't think you can pay for a solid week. I think you have to pay by the day, but you could still do it. They're not going to fight you on that. Rob says, I'm not from South Africa myself, but how are South Africans faring in the English industry in Japan? I've only met one South African who's taught English here, and it was an ALT job. So, I mean, if English is your first language from there, which, I mean, it might be, it might not be, you'd fare as anybody else from a country where it's not always a first language, which means you're not going to have as many job options. Sorry, it's just true. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but Ilyas, hey, if memory serves me, your wife is a dentist. I was wondering if you can provide a few prices for everyday procedures such as fillings, root canal treatments, etc. I don't know the exact prices on those because I get everything done for free, obviously. It's cheaper than America, that's for darn sure. I think like one of your biggest things would be like having a fake tooth made is around Juman if you don't have insurance, and Juman is about $1,000. Other than that, your prices are going to be pretty low. Especially if you have national health insurance here in Japan, which anybody will have if they have a full-time job, you'll find your prices are very manageable. Grant says, hi, how is your cat doing? My cat's okay, he's still annoying. I haven't seen him or her much since your apartment tour video. That was actually a house video, but okay. Secondly,
I have heard that many apartments have restrictions when it comes to animals. This is true. There are many no dog, no cat restrictions. Does this force people to go to cat cafes or rent dogs? Now, it's not that common, man. I know this is like really popular for people to read about, but cat cafes are not that common in Japan. Like, I can't imagine one within like a 100-kilometer radius next to my apartment. I can't think of any. And rent dogs, there are places to rent dogs, such as Dogtopia, but it's still not that common, man. Have you ever experienced this kind of restriction in your old apartments? No, I never have, actually. Derek says, how is the architecture career viewed in Japan? Is it highly respected, or is it like getting a liberal arts degree here in the States? Now, it's pretty well respected. Anything that's in any kind of art in Japan is actually pretty well respected. Art has a lot more respect than any place in America that I can think of, aside from maybe like New York or California. There's probably a lot more respect for the art career there. But in Japan, you would be surprised. Almost anything you would do in art is highly respected. People have a lot of respect for the arts in Japan. Anders says, in an earlier video, you talked about the fact that mental health is hush-hush in Japan. This is true. Most places, you actually got students who came for lessons, but more so a shoulder to cry on. That's true. I've had this in the past. Because a doctor felt that Gaijin people could deal with issues better. Yeah. I said that actually, and it's true. I have actually had students who told me their doctor recommended English lessons because they could tell their problems to an English speaker. Wouldn't that mean finding a profession in this field would be easier for a Gaijin? No, because that Gaijin would have to speak Japanese. Like, everybody, do you know how many times I get people watch the Dark Side of Japan video, which talks about mental health issues in Japan, which Japan does have a lot of, and then they're like, so it would be really easy for me to become a psychologist or a psychiatrist there. Do you speak perfect Japanese? No. How can you help people in a country that doesn't speak English as a first language, which has extremely low English literacy rate? The only country lower than Japan is Cambodia. So you have to speak Japanese. I can't express that enough. My situation was unique because they were coming to English lessons. That's why they were speaking English to me. A Japanese person is not going to be able to spill their guts in English. It's just not that common. Can you speak Japanese? If you can speak Japanese, you can go to Japanese websites and start reading about mental health issues and how you can get into that career field. If you cannot speak Japanese, no, you can't help them. I'm sorry. Danny says, if you haven't heard already, Scott, Japan and China tensions are really high since China is claiming Okinawa belongs to them. Yeah, that's totally ridiculous. What are your thoughts and opinions on the whole ordeal? Honestly, I view China sometimes as that kid who wants to play in the sandbox, but then bullies everyone and doesn't understand why they don't have any friends. China, you need to get over the whole island thing. Like, do you not have enough land? How much land do you already have? Why do you have to fight over these stupid little islands? Okay, according to the post-World War II treaty, Japan owns those islands. I would look at that as the definite truth that Japan owns those islands. If China wants to make up all kinds of false logic and all kinds of fake history, even the US is starting to yell at them about how stupid it is and how they need to stop fighting over it. Just let Japan have the islands. We know you want it because it's got some oil and it's got fish in it and stuff like that. Let it go. You got enough land already and you've ruined that land. Emma says, I think you missed my question on JFAQ4. Sorry, Emma. Are there many good Japanese horror games to buy? Emma, I actually did answer this, and I found out later that the camera had cut off. So, give me a second. I'm going to go get the game, and I'm going to turn off my camera right now and turn it back on to make sure I show it to you. 1 second. Okay, Emma, here's that game. I can't always read the kanji on this. If I'm correct, I think it says Emma Bikinso. It is a totally in Japanese game. You're not going to find it in English anywhere, sorry. If your Japanese reading skills are great, you're going to do awesome with this. I was okay with this because I had my wife sit down and play it with me. It was one of the few games she would play with me. She's pretty good on watching horror because she went to doctor school, so she's dissected a body and not much scares her at this point. It is kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure horror novel, and it is incredibly scary. This game series has a huge following all the way from PlayStation 1, and it's only sold in Japan. There's also other games made by the author that are equally as scary. I implore you to check it out. I'll put it a little bit closer. If someone can help her out there with the title, I'm not always sure with my kanji, so if someone reads kanji better than me, awesome, thank you. Alright, so that's your question. I did actually put this on the old one, and I found out later that the camera had cut off. So, my bad, Emma. Okay, Megan is next. My first question got missed out in the last one. Yeah, guys, I missed a couple in a few, and if I've ever missed yours, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to do it. Facebook has kind of a retarded way of setting up a huge list of comments and keeps making you go up, 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 and down, down, down. If I miss yours, it's never intentional. Please just post it on the next JFAQ and ignore the fact that I've missed it and take my apologies. Megan says, my first question got missed, so I'll post it again. Do you know the horror manga artist Junji Ito? No, I do not actually know him. Sorry. Vincent says, I was wondering, in relation to USA's gay rights or gun control, are there any current political or social issues in Japan that the country is split over? Any common things you overhear people speaking about on a daily basis? Okay, I wouldn't say necessarily split over. There are things that Japanese people are really pissed off about right now in politics, as far as, number one, the Fukushima victims are not getting any money from all the money that was donated to them. A lot of it's been spent on stupid-ass projects such as expanding roads and building in places as far away as Kyushu, which does not need any of the money because obviously the tsunami did not reach that far. Anybody looking at a map can tell that. The other one is recently with our mayor here in Osaka, Hashimoto, threw out a big comment about how pleasure women during the World War II were necessary for soldiers, which a lot of Japanese people do not believe, they do not agree with. They think that guy's an idiot, and they don't want their country associated with such an idiot. So those are kind of big issues right now. David says, how are Japanese drivers when it comes to following all the laws? I'd say, for the most part, Japanese people are pretty good at following road rules. One of the biggest problems, though, I do see is we don't have stop signs here. We have more of these white lines where the cars are supposed to stop and wait for pedestrians to pass. Not a lot of people follow that. From what I've heard from a lot of people who deal with truckers, apparently a lot of truckers tend to drive way too fast here in Japan. And if you read in the newspaper a lot about any kind of car accident, it always tends to be a trucker. So maybe be careful around truckers in Japan. Brianna asks, what events or holidays do they set off fireworks at in Japan? Obviously, Hanabi Matsuri is the most common. Hanabi meaning fire flower, which of course in the sky a firework kind of does look like a fire flower. You're mostly only going to see this in the summertime. Almost all Matsuris, that means festival, which fireworks take place summertime. It's the most common. Have you seen people cosplay on the streets? Yes, of course. Haven't you asked me this one before? Is it true that Barbies and American toys are expensive and kind of vintage in Japan? Yes. If you want to go to one of the most vintage, like horror and Western style toy shops here in Osaka, you want to go down to Astro Zombie in Denden Town. That's probably the best place, and they are kind of expensive. When walking on the street or on the train, do you generally see most people on their phones often? Yeah, I think you can look up the statistic now. Last time I read about it, 1 out of every 2 people in Japan has a cell phone. And people treat cell phones in Japan the way we have computers in America. And people are quite versatile on cell phones here. You would be surprised how much a Japanese old grandma can do on a Japanese cell phone. It's pretty amazing. Justin says, is there any controversies between China and the Japanese people in Japan? Well, I just answered that question about Okinawa, so yes. Adam says, hey Scott, 2 questions. What are the thoughts on Japanese language schools? Such as what? I've seen some advertised reaching fluency in 1 to 2 years in their program. 1 to 2 years? Maybe 2 years. There's one guy I know who in 2 years he became awesome, but he was kind of like a language genius. 1 year, no. I mean, maybe you can come close if you spoke only Japanese solid every day with total immersion in the language. But, I mean, 1 year only? That must be a brutal class. If it's like a brutal... I've heard there are some of these classes out here that are brutal study classes, like you're mastering something like 1,500 kanji a week. And if it's like that, okay, maybe. But you better be pretty darn intelligent yourself. Have you ever heard of the pop punk band from Florida, A Day to Remember? I don't think I have. I don't really keep up much with bands around the world anymore. You know, I listen to a lot of world music, but it's usually like top hits. Marco says, hey Scott, is it legal to hitchhike? Tramp. This is the guy who asked about tramping on the last video. I think it is legal to hitchhike, but I have only ever seen someone hitchhike one time. And they had the destination they wanted to go to written on a piece of cardboard. And I didn't see him get picked up in that time. So nobody stopped him, no police came after him, and it was in the middle of like a super busy urban area. And no police were harassing him or anything about it. So possibly okay. I've read some blogs, and one I read one time, a guy hitchhiked all the way around Japan and met some really interesting people, and he said it was a really good time. So he did it, and he was okay, and he never talked about any complaints or police laws broken or anything like that. So maybe totally okay. Zoe says, is it considered polite for when you stay with a host family or when you meet someone for the first time to give them a gift? Talked about this in the last one. Gourmet cookies. Give them some gourmet cookies for a housewarming gift. Hey, Scott from Charlie here says, are manual transmission cars favored over automatic in Japan? Yes, actually, manual transmission is favored over automatic in Japan. Or is it vice versa, like in the States? People who are hardcore into cars do favor the manual transmission, but your most common car is automatic. Okay, moving along. Carlos is next. He's got 2 questions. What is something in America you disliked that you are happy to know Japan doesn't have? The proselytizing from other religions that I don't need. That's probably a pretty big thing. No one really proselytizes to you in Japan. Number 2, you mentioned that a student fell in love with an English teacher. How common is this? And has it ever gotten anyone you know in trouble? I don't know if it's super common. I know it does happen. Does it get people in trouble? Yeah, definitely. Especially like ALT situations where obviously the kids are under 18 most times. You're not supposed to fall in love back. So if they do that, you would be in huge trouble. As far as the Kiowa situations where it's adult students, I've never heard of anybody get fired for it, but I've heard of people usually try to wait until they finish that job before they actually date the student. So my advice to you, if that ever happens in a Kiowa situation, with an ALT situation, it's hands off, guys. Russell said, hey, I know you already have heard questions about Brazilians in Osaka, but what about their culture? Are there many specialty shops and restaurants around Osaka dedicated to Brazilian culture? Not really, not that I can name offhand or even think of, so not really. There's not a lot. I'm sure there are some tucked away into corners and nooks within buildings, but I haven't found them yet. Andre says, are you still interested in building model kits like Gundams? Yeah, I still once in a while do one. I actually built a few with the Cajun Gaijin recently. If you guys don't know him, you should check out his channel, Adam, Cajun Gaijin. And how popular is that kind of thing? I mean, it's pretty popular as, I don't know, any other kind of otaku hobby. Is it easy to get model kits? Yeah, dude, it's super easy, and they're way cheaper. Like even a pretty good sized model kit you can get for like 10 bucks or 15 bucks. You can get a massive one for, $100, or, the cheapest I ever had was I got a huge perfect grade Zaku for only 80 bucks. I mean, that's pretty cheap. Sarah said, can you recommend a female J-vlogger with a channel style somewhat similar to yours? I don't really keep up as much with the J-vlogging world anymore like I should. I feel kind of guilty for that one. I don't know of any other J-vlogger women that do kind of the same style as me. I know of other J-vlogger girls, but I don't know that any that have the same style as me, like with tattoos and stuff. If there are any out there and you're watching this video, feel free to promote yourself or others watching this who know of those types. Please comment below. Maggie says, I feel like I'm asking you for advice now, haha. Coming from an Asian country to America, I've learned to be more openly aggressive. So that's coming from Asia to America, they become more aggressive. Is there a difference in comparison to US to Japan? How openly coworkers share personal information? Is it seen as untrustworthy if a person shares too much truthful information? Hiding things is the norm. Is this common? Like, do you ever feel like you have to be more reserved in sharing too much information about yourself? Yeah, Maggie, this is a good question. Maggie's right. I I think she already has some experience with Japan. I know at least Asian culture, I can say. She's talking about when you work at a place, you don't really share as much personal stuff as you would in the States. For example, you might talk a lot about your family, your personal life, your ups and downs, your hills and valleys, your sicknesses and health, your hobbies. Not a lot of this is going to get talked at, especially if you're working like a job within the public school system. You know, with your fellow gaijin at an Kaiwa, you can discuss this type of stuff because they'll probably be comfortable with it. But with your fellow Japanese coworkers, it's not as common to share this type of information. If you do it, you need to be somewhat close to that person and let them share with you first so that you know how much you can push the boundaries. But my advice is not to totally spill your guts when you start at a new place. Dandan suru. Mark says, "Hey dude, I'm from England. I'm slowly learning Japanese. I have a 3-year-old son. Was wondering if you could tell me more about schools for foreign children. Are they expensive?" Yes, they're very expensive. For international private schools would be quite expensive. Are they easy to get into? Well, I think as long as your child doesn't have any major learning disabilities, I mean, you can get in. Sometimes there's a test. Sometimes there is. For example, the school that my son went to, there's a test for like cutting with scissors, making shapes out of clay, a certain level of English proficiency. But that's more of a school that has a lot of test levels to get through to get in. Is there bullying? Well, if it's an international school, most kids are pretty well exposed to international people, so they don't really look at them in any odd manner. As far as kids getting bullied at public schools and stuff, that's not as common in Japan anymore. It's not as xenophobic as it used to be, say like bubble era or even like, you know, 1950s or something like that. Zachary says, has there been any culture shock about America for your Japanese friends or your wife when talking or visiting America? I think one of the things that a lot of Japanese people talk to me about that they find as a culture shock is how open and outgoing Americans are, as far as like, if you're just, an example of this was given to me by a Japanese coworker who recently went to America. She said she wore a watch, and people who liked the watch would come up to her and be like, "Oh, that's a really cool watch," and they'd start talking to her just because of the watch. And she thought like maybe there was some other reason, like maybe they had a different motive or something like that, but it was really like they just thought it was a cool watch and they wanted to talk to her. And she said in Japan, it probably wouldn't happen that much. So I think that was kind of a culture shock thing for her. Andrea says, what are your thoughts on gaijin kids going to school in Japan? Well, I just talked about that. I'm married and I have 2 kids and not sure what schools are good for them. When you get here, if you're going to come here with kids, you can send your kid to a public school if you know you're on the proper visa and everything like that. I don't think you're going to experience as many problems as a lot of people imagine, unless you're like absolutely in the deep countryside. Then you might run into some people who have not been as exposed to the outside world, a little more xenophobic, and not as used to an international culture. Emery says, 1, is your cat the same you had in your earlier videos? Yeah. How about your dog? Do you still have your dog? Sadly, my dog died. That dog was quite old. That dog was like 17 years old. Do you read any web comics? Like Penny Arcade? I read Penny Arcade. My favorites are Invisible Bread and Left-Handed Tunes. Okay, cool. It says, you said that you worked at some high schools in the past. So my question is, have you ever encountered any foreign exchange students? If so, was seeing a gaijin student strange at all? You know, I've seen a few gaijin students around town in my area because it's more of an international area, and it is kind of a surprise, and they do look a bit out of place in the Japanese uniform. Not saying it looks bad, it just is surprising to see the combination. One of the most surprising ones I ever saw, and she wasn't international, she was half, so she's born in Japan, Japanese national, but obviously half. She had blonde hair, and I could only see from the back, and I knew in high schools you're not allowed to dye your hair. And so I wondered why this Japanese kid had dyed her hair blonde and how she was getting away with it. And then she turned around, and she was pale white, gaijin skin, super blonde hair, but the most perfect Japanese eyes I had ever seen. And it was just like it was a beautiful combination. She was a beautiful girl. She was like, you know, I'm saying aesthetically, not in any passionate way. And I was just taken aback. I did not expect that. She spoke perfect Japanese. She also spoke perfect English. And she had a Japanese mom and a gaijin dad. And It was just, you don't tend to see that combination that often. Almost always, like my own son, brown hair and brown eyes. Zachary said, do you buy your gauges online, or is there a specialty store in Osaka? Zachary, it is really hard to buy gauges out here, and they are stupid expensive. If you have any kind of hookup with gauges, someone message me, because I would love to have more gauges and not pay an arm and a leg to get them, because out here they're just stupid expensive. Like, one gauge at this size would be like 60 bucks if it was something nice. And if it was like marble or something, it would be outrageous. Personally, right now, what I have in my ears, this is actually paint caps. That's how ghetto I am. Cash says, love your vids. Can you rank your ability to read, write, and speak, listen in Japanese? Rank each one 1 to 10, with 10 being the best. Oh, okay. So, hey guys, what's up? The camera ran out of juice, and I had to start over. Wouldn't you know it? Okay, so we're back to the question of what is my speaking, reading, and writing ability in Japanese. Guys, I'm going to answer the rest of these while drinking a strong 9, so if I start to get wacky with my answers, so be it. It's the alcohol talking, not me. Okay. From 1 to 10, I'd say my writing abilities are about a 3. My reading abilities are about a 3. Speaking, I'm a little bit better. If we were to list like from 1 to 10, like as in 1 being Tokyo Kuni, who can't speak any Japanese at all, in case you guys didn't know, he can't, to like number 10 being like Hiko Simon, who speaks on like a super professional level. And anybody who doesn't know that, yes, he can speak amazing Japanese. Even Victor from Give Me a Flake Man has told me that he respects his level. That's my son in the background, wiggly waggling a little bit because he's having a fun time playing with some new Ampon Man toys. I'd say my level is probably like a 5 on speaking. Obviously it's definitely a lot better than my 2 and 3 in reading and writing, but I'd say still I get a lot of grammar screwed up sometimes, so I don't want to give myself too high of a score. I want to stay humble with that. Next is Ramsey, says, if Japan allowed dual citizenship, would you consider naturalization? Ramsey, I don't think I would. I don't really see a point, aside from getting a little bit higher pension at the end of my retirement and being able to vote, which doesn't really matter in this country too much. Not really a point. I'd like to go ahead and keep my permanent resident visa, which is enough for me. I don't need anything more than that. Alright, Kyle says, in the previous JFAQ, you answered a question about cancer and partial hair loss. I was wondering, how do Japanese people react to viewing balding? I'm curious, seeing as I myself have lost my hair. Sorry, I just revealed that to the world, Kyle. Hage, being bald. How do Japanese feel about it? They're not too stoked on that because Japanese people are pretty excited about crazy haircuts. They're not going to totally, you know, you're not going to be ostracized or become some kind of pariah because of it, but I will say Japanese people do prefer a nice set of hair. Maybe implants? Eric says, hey Scott, since dryers aren't really all that common in Japanese homes, and you have to air dry your clothes, do your clothes become stiff and dried or crunchy instead of soft and comfortable? I would say no, because you've got, you know, really good fabric softener here, although towels tend to be a little bit crunchy, so that kind of sucks. Dryers aren't completely unheard of. You can buy one, and if you go to like a laundromat, they have dryers. Okay, Raul says, what questions are you usually asked about the U.S., and what do you usually answer to them? You know, I get asked a lot if I have a gun. I don't own a gun in America. I have shot a gun. Shot my first gun when I was 9 years old, so. They also ask me, like, what are dangerous areas sometimes, and like I said before, the most stupid, obvious questions, can you use chopsticks, like, even though you're from America? Yeah, we've got them in America. Richard says, hey Scott. I know you mentioned that it was easy to run into famous people in Japan, but would it be okay to approach them and strike up a conversation? If they're really busy, no. They look like they're in a rush. You gotta remember, like, Japanese people are super busy. You know, they work
anywhere from 8 to 12 hours on average. So that goes the same for comedians too, or actors, or any starlet you may see. You need to give them their time and their space. I mean, just think about how you would feel if someone stopped you that you didn't know and wanted to strike up a big conversation. Would you be stoked on that? Probably not. Michael says, hey, you mentioned that if you could live in another Japanese city, it would be Sapporo. I also have a lot of love for Sapporo because of Yuki Matsuri. That would be like snow festival. My question is, what attracts you to Sapporo? Well, that's just the thing. I love winter. I hate summer. Sapporo has long winters and short and very mild summers. So I think I would do it just for the fact that I wouldn't mind wearing long sleeves so much, because I obviously have to do that with tattoos in Japan. Kai said, what do you like about 30s Japan, aka Japanese fascism? Would you support Japan restoring its culture? Probably not, because I would be kicked out. What do I like about 30s Japanese? Like 1930s, like when they were fascists and like worshipped the emperor like a sun god? Probably not a lot. There's obviously a lot more cultural stuff going on that I appreciate. There was a lot more respect for World Heritage sites. Hey bud, what's wrong? You okay? I think I'm gonna have to give him a little time to go take a nap. Hold on just a second, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Alright, 1930s Japan, I mean, you know, as Gaijin we couldn't even live here in the 1930s. Like, we were all kicked out, so, I mean, it wouldn't go that well for me. How would I like living in that time? I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be able to live here. And he says, well, I can't think of too many things that haven't been asked. Boxers or briefs? Actually, I freeball it all the time, in case you were wondering. DVR questions. How is it called in Japanese? Do you mean, how do we say it in Japanese? Like, when you're speaking of DVR, like, I wish people would write out full abbreviations. I'm guessing what they mean here is, like, recorded television. Are they available to rent with the cable subscription? Not that I know of. Or instead buy your own, like TiVo. You would buy your own, and then I think you request a service through it. I don't know the specific different brands that have it, so sorry, I don't know why that would be that important. There's not that much good stuff you'd want to record here in Japanese TV. You've got your computer, watch it on that. Brian says, I just read an article about Japanese men locking themselves away on the BBC news site. They said they're called NEETs, fritters, and hikikomori. Have you heard of these terms, or is this just another shock story from the BBC? Actually, this one's correct, as I addressed earlier in this JFAQ. There is indeed hikikomori, which are shut-ins. Fritters and neeters, for those of you who don't know, a neet is someone who went to college and gained a skill that does not get them a job. A fritter is a person who is kind of like a parasite single and stays with their parents even after they graduate college. Yeah, these are all still common in Japan right now. That is becoming kind of a problem. I wouldn't say it's like massive, but if you're really super interested in the hikikomori problem, you can read a book called Blocking Out the Sun. It's a really interesting book on hikikomori that explores it a lot further. And it's actually done by a guy who was a reporter here for a very long time from Britain. And it's quite a good book. So if you're really interested in learning more about the hikikomori experience here in Japan, check out that book. And yes, it is true. This is actually something that's not blown out of proportion by the BBC. It actually is kind of a problem here. It's a problem enough that companies exist that have people who who are hired by the parents of these people who are hikikomori, and they go to the house to try and lure them out of the house. So it's got to be a big enough problem if they need to start an entire industry around it. Joseph says, I've gotten the evil eye with the last few questions. Really? Was I really perturbed with your last questions? How did I do? Was I like that? Sorry for that, Joseph. What is your experience on getting a haircut from Japanese people? I have been to some places that were like, oh, gaikokuchin no kamenoke wa mecha kawaii na. Like, you know, like they're intimidated by the fact that you've got a little bit different hair texture. But I've gone to other places where if the hairdresser is like really majime, like really serious and hardcore about their job, they don't give a crap if you're a gaijin or what kind of hair you have. They will work hard and they will give you an awesome haircut.
One thing about Japan, they are hardcore about learning how to cut hair. They refuse to use electric clippers. They will instead cut your hair with scissors like super fast. And it is amazing. It's an amazing technique. I've never seen it done till I came here. Perhaps other countries do that, but not America. Justin says, pros and cons for having a car in Japan or a motorcycle. Well, obviously the biggest pros and cons are traffic in Tokyo and Osaka. It's quite bad. And the other cons are the fact that you need to prove you have a parking space to own a car in Japan. The pros, you don't have to wait for the train. You don't have to be on a super hot, stuffy train, because let me tell you, trains in the summer suck. They don't really turn on the air condition very much, and everybody in there is stuffed to the gills. It's hot, it's humid, and it's sweaty. Justin says, problems for tall or fat gaijin. What do they face in Japan? Yeah, I've covered this one before, but, you know, pretty much clothing is your big problem. And, I mean, not a huge problem, but ducking. You gotta duck under a lot of doorways. There's a lot of small doorways in Japan. And I'd say probably just the biggest problem you're gonna have is clothes and shoes, man. Everybody who's big and tall here always complains to me about how they have to order everything from the States and have it shipped over, especially shoes. Shoes are impossible to find here if you're over, what is it, like 27, I think? I'm a 27.5 and I'm okay, but I'm just at the edge. Tyler says, are robots popular and is robot building popular? Yes, there's conventions based around robots and robot building, and it is popular here in Japan, yes. Definitely very much so. Alright, let me change the card out and I'll continue on. There's what I'm drinking in case you were wondering. Take a good look there. Strong 9 Chuhai. For those of you who want to punch in your drink. Oh yeah. Alright, let's continue on. I'm going to go ahead and be moving some stuff around on my computer, so if I'm staring at the computer while I talk, I apologize. I'm not being rude. I'm just setting up your questions to be added to the entire giant JFAQ10 video, because man, this one is stretching. We're at 45 minutes so far. Let's continue on. Alright, let's take a look here. Robots. Next is, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that Gaijin people and Japanese people have about each other? As far as like Japanese and Gaijin within Japan, or being away from each other in different countries and imagining? I'd say probably the biggest misconception that a lot of Gaijin have about Japan, if they've never been here, is that Japanese people are probably awesome at using computers, or that Japan is like super far in the future with their technology, because it's really not that way at all. And also, a lot of Japanese people cannot use a computer. I mean, I'm talking even my generation, they can't use a computer. For the most part, as I've said in past JFAQs and even in this one, I believe, Japanese people use a cell phone like they would use a computer, and they carry it around pretty much like a laptop. They use it for almost everything, and when it actually comes to laptops and desktops, which are even more rare, they're just not as versatile in their computers. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some people out there who are hardcore computer gamers and, you know, coders and stuff like that, but for the most part, you'll find the average Japanese person doesn't know a lot about computers. And also that there's not a lot of high-tech stuff, like, for example, air conditioners still don't have central AC or central heating. What else? There's some really old-fashioned ways about Japan, like, how about janitors still use the straw sweeper instead of a normal broom? And I don't know, you know, it could be argued both ways, I suppose, but a big stick broom with a big long head could sweep up a lot more than those old-fashioned straw ones you see. There's a lot of stuff like that, like they're just set in their ways in certain things, and there's nothing you or I or the Japanese will ever do to change that, because they like their traditions, and so be it. Good question. Oh, and about Americans, or I guess I can only really say about Americans, because I don't know their conceptions, their misconceptions about other countries, because I don't talk about that as much, but I know for us, they think a lot of us shoot guns all the time, like we're constantly shooting, like our life is like GTA, I suppose. They also tend to think that this is the weirdest one. They tend to think that most of us are like in really good shape and skinny like movie stars. And they're always like, I went to America and there were so many fat people. And I'm like, yeah, dude, we have a huge problem with that. And they're like, no, I thought they were all like Tom Cruise or something. No, dude. No. Totally wrong. Kim says, hi, Scott. I know you're probably sick of answering questions about tattoos. It's alright. Don't really mind that one too much. I'm not sure if you've answered this before. How do Japanese people feel about gaijin with Japanese-style tattoos? Would they think you're cool, or would they think you're a complete idiot? Well, that all depends. Does your tattoo have kanji that was done in America? Because if it does, they probably think you're an idiot. For example, people who get kanji of like water and fire and like, you know, different elements, that looks really weird. And also, I think one of the biggest problems, and this is something like a lot of gaijin don't understand, China uses kanji too. And if your tattoo artist doesn't know if they're using Chinese or Japanese kanji, which a lot don't in America, you're going to end up having something really retarded written on you. And the same goes for English in America. I've seen some really retarded English permanently tattooed on people here in Japan. For example, I've seen one that said, I love a tattoo. I love a tattoo. Just one tattoo? Which one? The one that you have on you that looks horrible? Oh, my cat. He's so loud. So loud. Shut up, dumb cat. He's really dumb. Okay. What is the most popular Western food here? If you ask any Japanese person that on the street, they're gonna say spaghetti. Don't know why. It's popular. Kyle says, what is, I'm sorry, that was Kyle's question, was the spaghetti one. See, I'm already starting to fall apart with the alcohol in my system. Okay, next name is hard to pronounce. Oh my goodness. Sonechika? I'm studying psychology and I'm interested. What do you think my chances are of finding a job in Japan or going to the undergraduate program? Well, I mean, you can get into the undergraduate program for like a school here, but do you mean finding a job as a psychologist? Do you speak Japanese, like perfect Japanese? Because Japanese people don't want to tell you their problems in a second language. It wouldn't make any sense. I know it's difficult, but do you know anybody who's succeeded? No, I don't know anybody who's succeeded in doing that. Okay, Ray says, Scott, is silence often viewed as an admission of guilt in Japan? No, I don't think so. How many of the new gaijin you meet come over there with disillusioned ideas of the people and the culture? I'd say a good percentage of us do. I mean, even I did. That computer thing, as far as thinking that Japan was going to be way more advanced with computers, I thought that before I came over, and I was totally wrong. How many gaijin stay long-term? How many types of these gaijin stay long-term? Not a lot. Some, like I said, some people come here with no language and no culture experience as far as Japan and the Japanese go. And then some come here and totally learn everything they possibly can. Like, I mean, this sounds really not humble, but and really arrogant, but I tried to learn as much as I could when I got here. I tried to learn a lot back when I was in the States too, but I think my problem was my access to books was limited as far as Japanese books, and my access to websites and J-vlogs were actually quite limited. Before I came here, the only two J-vloggers I could find were Hiko, Simon, and Victor, which they were great help, don't get me wrong, but it was just limited. I mean, they can only tell me so much because they only have so much time, right? Also, I read a lot of websites before I came here, but a lot of the information was outdated. So, that may happen to you, but I wouldn't worry too much, because if you come here with an open mind and a really ganbatte attitude for learning, you'll do awesome. Emery asks, what are your favorite and least favorite things about Amemura? Amemura is a very pop culture district down here in downtown Osaka. Things that I hate about it, I hate the fact that the police there are assholes. They're pretty much like the police or the mayor in the movie Footloose. You're not allowed to dance, and if you dance past midnight, you can actually get arrested. I'm not joking. What do I like about it? Okay, one of my favorite things, and this will always be one of my favorite things about Amemura, is in the middle there is Triangle Park. And Triangle Park is a place that's totally free to go to. You can sit down there and strike up a conversation with a Japanese person who is into your type of music, fashion, etc. And it's where I met some of my first friends here in Japan, and I love it. It's a great Natsukashi area. Natsukashi means nostalgic, if you were wondering. Alright, Kyle has a question here. He says, my question is there any benefit system in Japan? He says, benefits systems. So, if not, what happens if you lose your job? No, there's unemployment here. Also, as a side question, not sure if you've mentioned this, do you know any other languages aside from Japanese? I studied German in high school, but my German's very bad. I'm not going to speak any if you want me to. Would you say any other language is able to be taught there in Japan? Yeah, you know, Victor teaches Spanish, so, I mean, that obviously can work. Ryan says, hello. I quickly browsed through the questions regarding JFAQ10 and I did not see what I'm going to ask. Alright, that's very good, Ryan. I'm not sure if you've talked about it before. It may have slipped my mind. Anyways, I have a friend living in Japan. I forgot what region. That's okay. And he is getting hate mail. Ooh, this is interesting. It's juicy drama. He is getting hate mail and previously had hate-type graffiti written all over his apartment complex. What? I can only assume this isn't too common. No, I have never heard something like this happening. Wow, this is the exception, but I want to read more. I'm also surprised they made a reference about his teaching job as well. Ooh, that's scary, dude. The only comment I feel comfortable with indulging you in is that they made remarks such as, why did you come here and get out? Whoa, what the? Seriously, dude, what the hell? Are you serious? Oh man, the camera cut out again. Right in the middle of answering this really interesting question. Man, dude. Hold on, let me get this back up here. Alright. Why did you come here, get out? Have you encountered remarks like this before? I understand there's racism and what have you everywhere. I just didn't expect the culture to be so loud about it. Sorry for the long post. Man, dude, I am so sorry to hear this is happening to your friend, man. Holy cow. Does your friend speak Japanese? Has he gone to the police? Have you recorded this stuff? Like, he should definitely be recording this and taking it to the police, especially if there's vandalism involved, because if he's just getting hate mail, they might not do anything about it because they don't really have a lot of law over that in Japan. But vandalism, I mean, that they'll stop that no matter what. They're not going to let that stand. He should be recording this. I'm really sorry to hear about this. I don't know, if your friend can't speak Japanese, have him contact me and I'll help him out. I'll call the police for him if he wants me to, because that's messed up, dude. I'm feeling really sorry for your friend. Honestly, dude, have your friend contact me if he needs any kind of help with this situation. At least I know lawyers here and stuff like that. I can help him out a little bit. If nothing else, get him some lawyer information. Okay, Victor says, hey, Scott, I've been watching your videos since 2009. Wow, thanks, Victor. How do you imagine your life if you not went to Japan? I think he's trying to say, how do you imagine your life if you had not gone to Japan? Gosh, it's depressing to think about. Do you want to hear something crazy, guys? I guess I'm getting a little more personal here now that I'm taking a drink while I'm doing this. When I first got here, I was so afraid that I wouldn't get a visa to continue to stay here that I had nightmares about having to go back to Japan. I mean, go back to America. Oh, it's crazy to think about now. But, oh man, it's true. Honestly, the thought of going back to America is depressing to me. I don't ever want to go back. Life is really good for me here. I've got a great job. I've got a great family. I own my own property. I had none of this back in America. I couldn't even get a decent job. I was working a crap-ass job that was dead end. So I imagine it being somewhat depressing. Maybe I wouldn't be married either. I don't think I would have ever gotten married if I had not gone to Japan. Especially had kids either. I mean, here I don't have to worry about any of the problems, like such as someone might consider this a small one, but I consider it huge. Just the amount of medical bills that it would cost for a child and for the proper care of one in America would be a hell of a lot more. In Japan, I never have to worry about that. A doctor's visit for my kid in Japan costs 500 yen. That's $5. And guess what? That includes any medicine. And it's prescribed and given to him there at the hospital or the clinic that he goes to. I mean, that alone would make me stay here in Japan just for my child's health. I don't want to ever go back to America. Ahmed says, do you have any favorite Western movies? Any good movies you've seen lately? Lately I saw Adam Preacher. I really like that. I know it's cheesy as hell, but I really like Adam Preacher. I really, really want to see Tater City. If anybody can get me a copy of Tater City, I'd be stoked. Wink, 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 hint, 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 hint. Nina says, question number 1, have you noticed some J-vloggers have said that most Japanese toilets are like an opening? You have to squat over them. What about the high-tech kinds? You've shown during your house tour video, well, this one's all over the place. Which kind is the most common? More and more, the Western style toilet is becoming more and more common. That's interesting that you asked that, because recently there was a census done in the Japanese newspaper Daily Yomiuri about Japanese kids in elementary school are complaining that they have to hold their bowel functions because they refuse to use the washiki benjo, which is the Japanese style toilet, which pretty much is a hole in the ground. Number 1, because it's kind of difficult to use. You just like squat over it, and if you're too tall or too big or not positioned correctly, you're either gonna piss your pants or shit them. So it kind of sucks, especially if you're a big dude, man. It's hard for me because I'm not massive, but I've had some that are so small, like the actual area that it's contained in is so small that for me, bending down, my knees are like smacking into the door. On top of that, like if you can't hold your weight correctly, you can't balance correctly, you're gonna fall back into your own poop. So you have to like hold on sometimes to the flushing mechanism and hope it doesn't like break off from the wall. So they're becoming less and less unpopular. I mean, less and less popular. Alcohol. Question 2. Do you plan on having any more children, and are you wishing you had a little girl too? That's a good question. Actually, yeah, we are hoping to have one more kid, and we are hoping for it to be a girl. We wanted to have a girl our first and second time. I personally really don't care what I have, boy or girl. I just want a healthy kid. That's all that matters to me. But my wife has really been set on having a daughter, so we will perhaps try one more time, even though I already... Well, the card actually ran out of memory on that one. Man, I am having a lot of problems today with this. I wish I could just finish this. Hence, I'm drinking at 6:30 p.m. to try and get through this. Okay, guys, let's take a look here. What do we have next? I answered the one about, yes, I want to have a daughter. She has a third question. This is Nina still. In America, celebrity culture and tabloids are unfortunately a huge deal to the masses. Is it the same way in Japan? Yeah. And there is stupid gossip, too, here about all different types of celebrities. The most recent gossip is Ando, the famous ice skater here in Japan. She secretly had a baby, and she's a single mother, which is pretty rare in Japan. One more thing, you mentioned you had dyslexia and ADD very briefly in the last JFAQ. I was wondering if you could share what it was like for you and what degree of an obstacle that was for you trying to learn and read and write in Japanese. It is hard, man. Well, my dyslexia, it's pretty much gone away at this point. Like, dyslexia slowly does go away if you treat it with different study habits and stuff like that. So I really don't deal with the dyslexia anymore, but my ADD is bad for the Japanese. I mean, it's probably why people like Sam, if you know Tokyo Sam, he can already speak a hell of a lot better than me because he probably remembers a hell of a lot more. I don't know, I've been really good at being able to memorize words. Like, I have a huge vocabulary, but my memorization of grammatical skills, due to the fact they're step by step, is pretty bad. Ray says, hey Scott, thanks for accepting the friend request. What is your favorite city or town outside of Osaka? I probably would say my favorite is Nagoya next. Nagoya is pretty fun. It's kind of like a watered down Osaka. It's got Nagoya Joe, if you guys want to check that one out. Also, Victor and Daichen live out in Nagoya, and they're pretty cool people, so that makes it a fun place too. Also, you said you love the oranges in Japan. What other fruits and vegetables do you see as being better than what we have in the US? Grapes are freaking awesome, man. Grapes in Japan. Holy hell. It is like candy. Man, it is so good. One of those square watermelons is pretty nice, too. Hey, Scott. Uh-oh. I'm starting to pick up little messages here. I gotta turn the sound off. Hey, Scott. Thanks for your friend oh, no, I'm sorry, James. I'm starting to get mixed up here. James said, your wife's thought on your Pokemon collection. She doesn't care at all. Emery says, have you ever recognized... okay, now this one's just written wrong. Have you ever recognized you on the street from video? Like, huh? Oh, has anyone ever recognized you on the street from your videos? I'm sorry, I read it wrong. Emery was correct. Yeah, actually, surprisingly, quite a few times. Probably like, I don't know, 10 times now. People have come up to me and be like, are you Unrested? That's cool, man. If you guys ever see me, you come here and you visit, or you move here and you live here and you see me, totally feel free to say hi. Brett says, a question that I get asked a lot. What is the opinion on marijuana in Japan? Well, it's illegal. That's the opinion. Don't get into that whole scene when you're here, man. If you do, you're gonna face some serious jail time and deportation, even for the smallest, tiniest iota of carrying that stuff, man. Don't do it, dude. Media, am I saying this right? Media says, I heard from people on YouTube that they learn Japanese by watching anime or studying everything along with talking, which would be better for someone who does not live in an area greatly populated by the Japanese speaking native. I am starting my major in Japanese in fall. I'm so excited. My advice to you would be, if you can find a Japanese friend online and Skype with them, that would probably help a lot. Yes, you can learn stuff from anime or watching TV shows. My suggestion is try to focus on an anime that's set in like a natural setting, a modern natural setting. Because if you get into too fantasy stuff, like you're gonna get some crazy ass Japanese. She has another question. How could someone get comfortable with the subway when maps look confusing? Really? Dude, the maps are pretty easy in Japan. How do you know which to take and when? Dude, you'll figure it out. It's so easy, man. It's even written in Romaji, which is like, you know, pretty much English. It's pretty simple. You're terrified. She says she's totally terrified to use these subways here. Don't worry. You'll be okay. It's fine. It's super easy, man. Just take like 1 or 2 when you don't have to try and get to a job just to learn the system. Then when you finally do get a job where you have to take a subway to get there, you'll be totally comfortable. I wouldn't worry too much about it. One more question. May I have a direct video talking about student visas, banks, etc.? I have a bank video. I don't have a student visa because I don't have a video on that because I've never been a student in Japan. I never will have a video on that. Man, dude. It cut out again. Let me tell you what. I had a card. It was a 16 gigabyte card. And I could take super long videos on it. And I had it for 2 months. The thing stopped working. And every time I try to record on it, it just says, unreadable file format. So I don't know what's going on with that. I wish I still had my 16 gigabyte card because right now I am using 2 gigabyte cards. And that means I have to record 10 minutes at a time and then switch it out, put it on my computer, erase it, and put it back in and start recording again. Do you know how hard that is to do? It is a pain in the ass. Media, we're still on your questions. You actually have the last few questions. She asked 4 in a row. Totally okay. I want to just let you guys know, if you have more than one question, it is totally okay. Just make sure it's a question that has not been asked before. We did get a few of them on this one. Okay, sorry. Media says, I have a Okay, make a video about making student visas. I'm never going to make a video on student visas. I'm never going to be a student in Japan. I graduated in 1998 from high school, and I graduated in 2002 from college. I'll never go to school here. All right, last question. Do you know any programs besides programs that have students help with English in Japan? What? Did I read that wrong? Also, do you know any other programs besides programs that have student help with English? I think you need some help with English too. Sorry, that was mean. Okay, I guess she's asking, are there programs for students to help them with English as well as Japanese in Japan? Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's classes because this is the nation of teaching English, right? This is what I used to do for a full-time job before I became an illustrator. There's tons of stuff you can do to learn English here. Go to an Ikaiwa, English Conversation School. Learn it from them if you want to. They don't care if you're not Japanese. You can go learn English from them. All right, I can tell you I am not one for helping someone with their studies. All right, that's it. It just ended. That was the last question, and she ends it with that. That's totally okay. Good question, guys. Pretty much, this one was a really good set of questions. Even if it was super long, I don't care. I enjoy answering you guys' questions. Guys, I need to let you know right now, the profile that you have been posting your questions on is actually going to be moved over to the Unrested JFAQ fan page. And the reason for me doing this, number one, we're going to go ahead and make a brand new Unrested JFAQ website, which will be connecting to that page. On top of it, I was informed by a viewer that you can only have 5,000 ads as far as friends on the profile pages for just a person, and I need to be able to expand to an infinite amount. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm going to get millions and millions of people, but I want to always have the option, right? On top of it, it's going to help us organize the JFAQ questions a lot better, and it's going to let me get these videos out a lot more quicker. Double superlative. Anyway, until next time. Oh, that's the doorbell. Gotta go. Until next time, I'm Unrested. This is JFAQ. I gotta go answer the door.